Donald Trump, a name that evokes strong emotions and opinions across the spectrum. Whether you see him as a hero or a villain, there's no denying his impact on American politics and society. Love him or hate him, his presence is impossible to ignore. His policies, his speeches, and his very persona have left an indelible mark on the nation. You can't deny the guy knows how to make a splash. From his early days as a real estate mogul to his time as a reality TV star, Trump has always been in the spotlight. From reality TV to the Oval Office, he's always been about bold moves and big headlines. His transition from "you're fired" to "you're hired" as the President of the United States was nothing short of dramatic. And nowhere was that more apparent than in his immigration policies. These policies were a cornerstone of his campaign and presidency, reflecting his commitment to a particular vision of America. America First was the rallying cry, a promise to put American citizens ahead of all others. This slogan resonated with many who felt left behind by globalization and economic change. But what about those who weren't born under a lucky star-spangled banner? For immigrants and refugees, this vision often felt exclusionary and harsh. Well, for many, Trump's vision of America felt a lot like a closed door. The policies enacted under his administration made it increasingly difficult for new immigrants to enter the country. He tightened borders, ramped up deportations, and made it clear that the welcome mat had been yanked away. The message was unmistakable. America was no longer the land of open arms. The message was loud and clear: if you weren't already on the inside, good luck getting in. This approach was praised by some as a necessary measure to protect American jobs and security, and even for some who were already here, the American dream was starting to feel more like a nightmare. Families who had lived in the U.S. for years suddenly found themselves facing an uncertain future. This wasn't just about numbers or statistics. It was about people's lives being turned upside down. The human cost of these policies was profound, affecting countless families and communities. Families separated, dreams shattered, and a whole lot of fear and uncertainty injected into communities across the country. The emotional toll was immense, leaving scars that would last for years. Trump's immigration crackdown was a defining feature of his presidency, and its effects continue to reverberate today. The debate over immigration remains a contentious issue with strong opinions on both sides. As the nation grapples with the legacy of Trump's policies, the conversation about what it means to be American continues. The impact of his America First approach will be felt for generations to come. Now, when it comes to immigration, Colombia was a country that found itself square in Trump's crosshairs. His administration's policies were clear and unyielding, targeting nations that were seen as sources of illegal immigration. Colombia, with its long history of political instability and economic challenges, became a focal point in this broader strategy. See, Colombians were among those seeking a better life in the United States, often fleeing violence and poverty back home. The journey was perilous, but the promise of safety and opportunity in America was a powerful draw. Families would often risk everything, leaving behind their homes and loved ones in search of a brighter future. But in Trump's eyes, they were part of the problem, not the solution. His administration viewed the influx of immigrants as a threat to national security and economic stability. The rhetoric was tough, and the policies were even tougher. Trump made it clear that he would do whatever it took to stem the tide of immigration, even if it meant upending lives and economies. He slapped tariffs on Colombian goods, squeezed their economy, and threatened even harsher measures if they didn't play ball on immigration. The economic pressure was immense, affecting everything from trade to local businesses. Colombian exporters found themselves in a bind, struggling to navigate the new tariffs and maintain their livelihoods. His message was clear: stop sending us your people, or face the consequences. The administration's stance was unambiguous, and the repercussions were felt on both sides of the border. Protests erupted, with people decrying the harsh measures and calling for more compassionate policies. Yet, the administration remained steadfast, doubling down on its approach. Then came the deportation flights. These flights became a symbol of the administration's hardline stance, with planes filled with Colombians being sent back to their home country. The scenes were heart-wrenching, as families were torn apart, and individuals who had spent years building lives in the U.S. were forced to leave. Plane after plane filled with Colombians being sent back, many of whom had built lives in the United States over many years. The emotional toll was immense, with tearful goodbyes and uncertain futures awaiting those who were deported. The impact on communities was profound, as friends and neighbors watched their loved ones leave, unsure if they would ever return. It was a chaotic and heartbreaking spectacle, with families torn apart and people dumped back into uncertain futures. The deportation centers were crowded and the conditions were often dire. Reunions at airports were bittersweet as people grappled with the reality of their new circumstances. The human cost of these policies was stark and undeniable. Trump's tactics were harsh, uncompromising, and undeniably effective. The administration's approach sent a clear message to other countries as well: cooperate on immigration or face severe consequences. The impact was felt far beyond Colombia, as other nations took note and adjusted their policies accordingly. The ripple effects of these actions were significant and far-reaching. He put immense pressure on Colombia, forcing them to choose between their own people and their relationship with the United States. The diplomatic tensions were palpable, with high-stakes negotiations and public statements from both sides. Colombia found itself in a difficult position, trying to balance its domestic needs with the demands of a powerful ally. It was a classic Trump move. Make a big, dramatic gesture and let the chips fall where they may. The administration's actions were bold and controversial, sparking debates and discussions across the political spectrum. Supporters praised the tough stance, while critics decried the human and economic costs. The drama played out on the world stage, with everyone watching to see what would happen next. But the fallout from this particular gamble would be felt far and wide. The economic and social impacts were profound, affecting countless lives and reshaping the relationship between the two nations. The story of Trump's immigration policies and their effects on Colombia is a complex and multifaceted one, with lessons and implications that continue to resonate today. Enter Gustavo Petro, Colombia's new president, a man not known for backing down from a fight. He looked at Trump's tactics and said, "No mas." Petro wasn't about to let Colombia be bullied, especially not by a man he saw as a threat to democracy and human rights. He called out Trump's policies as inhumane and counterproductive, arguing that they only serve to punish the vulnerable while doing little to address the root causes of migration. Petro's stance was a breath of fresh air for many in Colombia and beyond. He refused to play the role of the submissive Latin American leader, choosing instead to stand up for his country's dignity and sovereignty. This was a turning point in the relationship between the two countries. Petro's defiance marked the beginning of a new era, one in which Colombia was no longer willing to be treated as a pawn in America's immigration game. Section 4. A nation divided. Colombians react to Trump's policies. Back in Colombia, Trump's immigration crackdown sparked a wave of anger, fear, and confusion. Families were being torn apart, with loved ones sent back to a country they barely recognized. The economic pressure was also taking its toll, as tariffs hit businesses and ordinary Colombians felt the pinch. Public opinion was divided. Some supported Petro's tough stance, praising him for standing up to Trump and defending Colombia's interests. Others questioned his approach, worrying that his defiance could backfire and lead to even harsher consequences. The debate played out on the streets, in homes, and across social media. The issue of immigration, always a sensitive one, became a lightning rod for broader anxieties about national identity, economic security, and Colombia's place in the world. It was a time of deep uncertainty and soul-searching for many Colombians, as they grappled with the consequences of Trump's policies and the best way forward for their country. Section 5. Collateral damage, the ripple effect on India. While the drama unfolded between the US and Colombia, another country was watching with growing unease: India. The Indian government and its citizens were glued to their screens, anxiously following every development. The stakes were high, and the implications of US policies were far-reaching. You see, Indians were among those caught in Trump's immigration net, with thousands facing deportation and an uncertain future. Families were torn apart and dreams were shattered as the harsh reality of the new policy set in. Airports became scenes of emotional farewells, with many unsure if they would ever return to the lives they had built in the US. Trump's message to India was similar to the one he delivered to Colombia: get your people in line or face the music. His speeches were filled with stern warnings and ultimatums, leaving little room for negotiation. The Indian government found itself in a precarious position, trying to navigate the turbulent waters of international diplomacy. He threatened visa restrictions, economic sanctions, and other punitive measures, sending shockwaves through the Indian government and business community. The potential economic fallout was immense, with businesses fearing the loss of crucial trade deals and investments. The uncertainty loomed large, casting a shadow over India's economic prospects. The situation put India in a delicate position. The government had to weigh its options carefully, balancing the need to protect its citizens abroad with the imperative to maintain strong diplomatic ties with the US. It was a tightrope walk, with every decision carrying significant consequences. On the one hand, they had a large and influential diaspora in the US, many of whom were directly impacted by Trump's policies. These individuals had contributed significantly to both the American and Indian economies, and their well-being was a matter of national concern. Cultural events and community gatherings became platforms for expressing solidarity and seeking solutions. On the other hand, they were wary of antagonizing a global superpower and jeopardizing their economic interests. The US was a key trading partner, and any strain in relations could have far-reaching repercussions. Diplomatic channels were abuzz with activity as Indian officials sought to find a middle ground. It was a high-stakes game of diplomacy, with India trying to balance its own interests with the needs of its citizens abroad. Negotiations were intense, with every word and gesture scrutinized for its potential impact. The pressure was palpable, and the stakes could not have been higher. And as Trump's crackdown continued, the pressure on India only intensified. The streets of India were filled with concerned citizens, and the halls of government echoed with urgent discussions. The ripple effect of US policies was felt far and wide, leaving India to navigate a complex and challenging landscape.